Maybe I was calling the government's bluff. Or maybe I wanted to savor that delicious time before classes started and not squander a rare day devoid of academic anxiety by waiting in line at the registrar's office. In any case, what I wasn't doing was asking the registrar to notify my draft board that I was officially a student. According to a new law, that step was required to get a student deferment from the draft. Nonetheless, the war in Vietnam wasn't weighing on my mind on that glorious day, and I was oblivious to the fact that by not going to the registrar, I was setting myself up to being drafted into the United States Army, handed a rifle, and told to shoot my Asian brothers. Summer faded quickly. Stinging, icy winds sliced down from the north, and on a gray December day, an official letter arrived in my mailbox. Summer faded quickly. Oh, I read that part. As I read this letter, the rest of the world vanished. All that existed was a soulless piece of paper summoning me to an induction physical in preparation for being drafted into the United States Army. The sobering news of my draft notice swept through campus. "What are you going to do?" I was asked several times a day. Trying to lighten the mood and appear in control, I gave silly answers in the spirit of a fellow Rutgers art student who had shown up for his draft physical with glitter in his pubic hair. After trying several responses, the answer that got the heartiest laugh was that I would wear a dress. It became my go-to retort. I was so caught up in being flippant that I didn't give any thought to what I would actually do to avoid getting drafted. I shut my mouth off so much about wearing a dress that people began to think I was serious about doing it. But now at the 11th hour, with no other plan, I rummaged through my mother's closet for inspiration and found a Japanese-styled beach dress that she had made of lush terry cloth. This'll do, I thought. The draft letter instructed me to report to my draft board in Burlington at 5 a.m. From there, we would be bused north for the physical. For me, that meant being driven south 1 hour to board a bus, only to be driven north for 2 hours. What a waste, I thought. Why didn't they just tell me to show up in Newark? The night before the physical, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. When it was time to get ready, I put on the dress and a pair of English riding boots and covered the ensemble with a long brown leather Army officer's overcoat circa World War II that I had bought at a local flea market for $10. The overcoat hid the dress and my bare knees. "How do I look?" I asked Mike, who had volunteered to drive me. There are no words that would do justice. "But you need a hat." I pulled out an oversized beret made of ribbed brown velvet that my mother had designed 30 years earlier. It looked like a giant off-center mushroom. "Perfect," he declared. As we walked to the car, a frigid January wind blasted up my dress and seared my naked thighs. "Oh my God," I writhed. I clearly didn't anticipate this. The local draft board was located in an empty store in downtown Burlington. Through the picture window, I saw it was packed with rough-looking 20-year-olds. There were no chairs. We pulled in next to a New Jersey State police car. Its 2 policemen stared at me and smirked. At that moment, a wave of panic consumed me. "I can't get through with it. Mike, take me home." "Fred, this is great. The more miserable you can be in the next several hours, the better off. Even crying will help your case." Buoyed by that strange pep talk, I got out of the car and entered the draft board. I braced myself to be harassed by all the prospective draftees. But there wasn't a peep. As ridiculous as my appearance was, no one even looked up. Each person was deep in his own thoughts. We were sheep being led to slaughter, and everyone knew it. The bus to Newark had 44 seats. There were 43 of us. Every seat was taken, except one next to me. Grateful for the time alone, I solidified my plan. I reminded myself to not put on an act. Better to be myself and just let the dress do the talking. As we filed in the induction center, a soldier shouted, "Take off your hat!" I began to comply, but stopped defiantly. If I'm going to do this, I thought, I got to go all the way. But as soon as our group entered another room, an angrier voice bellowed, "Take off your goddamn hat!" Whoa, I said to myself. If they're this bent out of shape over a hat, they're really going to lose it when they see what's under this coat. I removed my hat. We were handed files of our personal information, and then herded into a large room with rows of long benches. A short sergeant rooster strutted in front of us and screamed orders and insults. Once we were seated, he stood before us, disdainfully looked over us, and then barked, "Okay, all you shit faces, take off your clothes now." I removed my leather overcoat, walked over to him while he was ranting, and said sheepishly, "Excuse me, sir, but I don't want to take off my clothes." He jerked his head in my direction, ready to shower me with verbal abuse. But as soon as he saw the dress, he lost his ability to speak and produced only gagging sounds. After a second's long struggle, he finally managed, "Papers. Where the hell are your papers?" "They're over on the bench," I replied. "Get them." "Okay, please hold this." I handed him my overcoat. He took the coat and then realized what he had done and threw it down in a rage. "Just get me your goddamn papers." When I returned, another soldier had joined him. The new soldier handled me as if I were a fragile porcelain vase. He ushered me into a dimly lit room. I assumed a semi-fetal position on a folding chair in the corner. An officer at the desk opened my file. "To save you the embarrassment of taking off your clothes," he said gently, "we'll just fudge your whole physical right here, if that's okay with you." I nodded. "Great," he said, and he proceeded to flip the pages, scribble, rubber stamp, and ask random health questions. He was done in 2 minutes. He slapped my file closed, handed it to me. "After you give this to the sergeant, you're free to leave." I forced myself from showing any relief or joy. Head down, I exited the induction center. Once outside, I ran from the building, took a cab to the train station, and boarded the next train to New Brunswick, New Jersey. I was back at Rutgers before lunch. Weeks later, I received a 4F classification, which stood for unfit for military service. Credit the Army for getting that part right on many levels. A postscript. Long before receiving my draft notice, I had contemplated applying for conscientious objector status. However, every draft advisor told me that I faced an impossible battle, as I had never been a member of any church and would never have been able to convince a draft board without a provable religious affiliation, plus a recommendation from a clergyman. On the other hand, while I may not have had the requisite religious bona fides, I had something even better: a mother who was a fabulous fashion designer. Now, just one second. My mother, she made two dresses that were identical except for the color. One was gold and one was red. I gave the gold one that I wore to the draft physical to a girlfriend, but I do have the red one if you'd like to see it.